welcome everyone to the webinar, Transforming Firm Data into Client Value, KM Success Stories with Foundation. My name is Barry Solomon, and we're going to introduce the panel in just a moment, but I remember how hard it used to be. This was when I was practicing law, and this was before email, so you couldn't send out a pardon the interruption email, and I don't remember very many pardon the interruption memos because we used to write memos to each other, and someone would deliver twice a day, hard copy memos to everybody in the firm. And this was even before there were professionals you could turn to as a lawyer to ask for help. So you had to kind of walk around. You were on your own, asking lawyers, begging for help, for information. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And we have three terrific knowledge management and data professionals that have joined us. And so let's introduce ourselves. My name's Barry Solomon. I'm a vice president here at Litera. Started my career as a lawyer, as I mentioned, at Sidley Austin before probably most of you were born. And I left my practice the first time to join help found a software company, a CRM solution. When we sold that, I went back to Sidley as their chief marketing officer. And while I was there, started to work on another software solution, and I ended up joining that. It's where I met Cindy. She was an early adopter, as was Sidley, of Foundation, and she and I worked together actually for a little bit. And then when we sold to Litera, that's how I ended up here. So I'm going to jump right in. So I'm going to kind of have the introductions do double duty, and I'm going to have each of our panelists, Cindy, Paul, and Stacy, each not only introduce yourself, but as you do, also describe, what the Foundation platform is to you and how it's used in your firm. So Cindy, why don't we start with you, with your introduction and how you're using Foundation.
Sure. Thanks so much, Barry. My name is Cindy Bear, and I am the Chief Data and Innovation Officer at Frost Brown Todd. We have about 650 lawyers across the country, and we're really focused on the sectors of manufacturing, finance, and energy in particular. And so at Frost Brown Todd, I was able to start a brand new department, Data and Innovation. And one of the first things we did was put Foundation into place, and it's really had a major impact on our efforts in the last 3 years. It is the source of data about our clients, about the work that we do for them, and about our professionals who do that work. So we found it really invaluable to supporting our clients and also supporting our growth as a firm.
Thanks, Cindy, and I'm sure we'll dig in further as we talk. Paul, why don't you go ahead with your introduction?
Sure. Hi. Thanks for having me here today, Barry. My name is Paul Vandermeer. I'm the Chief Knowledge Officer at Bills & Sundberg in Miami, Florida. Our firm has about 110 attorneys in a single office in Miami, and my team has 7 people that include 2 librarians, 2 application developers, a project manager, docketing manager, and a training and adoption coordinator. So for us, Foundation serves as the backbone of our experience management strategy. It's a centralized system that brings together attorney, client, matter data from multiple sources, including time and billing, and all the usual things that people bring into Foundation. But we use Foundation to capture, organize, and surface the full breadth of our firm's experience with the goal of making it easier to answer the very common question, which Barry, you talked about at the beginning, is have we done this before, right? Overall, Foundation has helped us turn experience into an asset, not just for marketing, but for firm strategy, client development, and lawyer enablement. It's a foundational tool to how we connect data to practice at Bills & Sundberg.
Thanks, Paul. And finally, Stacy, if you could introduce yourself and describe your perspective on Foundation.
Yeah, so I'm Stacy Rushing, Director of KM and Legal Analytics at Fisher Phillips. We have about 650 attorneys spread across 40 offices now in the US and recently international in Mexico and Tokyo. And we've been using Foundation for about 5 years. And same as the others, we're bringing in data from many sources. One of the unique things about Fisher Phillips is we're only a labor and employment firm. That's all we do. And so I think because of that, the information that we have to provide is much more detailed. Just saying it's labor and employment isn't enough information. So we have to really get into the nitty gritty of the exact claims that are involved and the resolution, specific outcomes, whether it's jury trial, bench trial. People are asking us, clients are asking us very specific questions because we're so narrowly focused. So I think that's one thing unique about our use.
Terrific. So before I jump into the questions, just to provide a little context, in thinking about, things have evolved a lot since, manual memos went around. And now most firms, and certainly these three firms, work with and deal with data. And, the classic thought is that, data becomes information when you provide context, when you put them in taxonomies, when you organize it, and then when you take that information, you add experience, you get knowledge. And, people typically look at technology focused on the data and humans focusing on the knowledge, with kind of both of them, working with the information. We're living through a very exciting time, and although we're not going to dig into this in particular, if you think about what Gen AI is doing, it's introducing the opportunity and providing time for people to do even more, because turning data into information and then even into knowledge, Gen AI can help with some of that, arguably. It used to take a lawyer looking at an agreement and thinking about it, for example, to really figure out, okay, what is market today? That is the knowledge. Today, Gen AI can help make that happen almost magically to some, but human beings really are necessary to provide the judgment and insight. And, I believe that it's the intersection of people with technology, including Gen AI, that ultimately provides value. So with that, before we jump in, just so that we can get a sense of the dozens of people on, we're going to do a poll, because it used to be, when I first became CMO at Sidley, not very many firms had a commercial experience solution. So we're going to do a poll that asks everybody on the call, what are you doing today with experience? So Ann, if you could go ahead and put that poll up. So how do you currently manage your firm's experience and credentials? And, do you not have anything? So if you don't, you're probably relying on spreadsheets and maybe shared documents, or like we did back in the day, it was just in the heads of some of the lawyers. Or do you have a bespoke or custom homegrown experience management solution? Are some of you using Litera Foundation? All three of these panelists are. Or do you have another third-party experience or perhaps proposal solution that's more of a point solution, although we're looking at this as an enterprise? So please pick one of these four, and we'll take a look at what the audience is in terms of what you're using to manage experience and credentials. I think that's enough time, because it's just checking one box. So why don't we go ahead and take a look. Nope. There we go. 75% are using Foundation. That is great to hear. 8% not really using much of anything other than documents in Excel, and then about 15% with homegrown solutions. So it doesn't surprise me because it's well over 60% of the firms using Foundation. So it's always good to be together with the Foundation Nation. So with that, even before we dig into the technology, Paul, I'll start with you to set the stage. Can you share some of your firm's goals in terms of knowledge management, data, and innovation?
Sure, yeah. Without sharing strategic plans, I can definitely share some of the plans that we have for KM and the goals in that regard. And that is, there are a few things. One would be centralizing institutional knowledge, right? So building a modern searchable knowledge base, capturing precedents, playbooks, checklists, and client work product. And Foundation plays into a lot of these goals. And in some respects, it helps kind of drive these initiatives in other ways without actually using the product. But I'll keep going through my list here. So another would be promoting a culture of knowledge sharing. And Foundation is, I think, one of the keys to success with Foundation is promoting a culture of knowledge sharing, encouraging staff and attorneys to contribute to the profiles, to the data, and making it more rich and building out those profiles in a meaningful way. Also standardizing and improving work product, creating and maintaining templates, clause libraries, process maps for frequently used legal documents and matters. And that comes about in part by using the way that Foundation has organized these matters, right? So using that organization to help understand the types of matters and then taking those and creating those templates and clause libraries from there. Also enabling smarter search and retrieval, implementing advanced search across DMS, internet, email, KM repositories, with filtered by metadata and practice group. And we have enterprise search, and I can tell you that a lot of the data and metadata that we use in our search comes from Foundation, in addition to a number of other places. But Foundation is certainly a rich source for that information. And then the other thing that I put down on my list was enhancing onboarding and training. So delivering role-specific training, matter summaries, and curated resources to help accelerate the ramp up of new lawyers, and also having a way to take the experience that those lawyers have and immediately bring it into our system, bring it into Foundation, and make it part of the experience and get them up to speed. On top of that, Foundation gives them the ability to look at their peers and see what their experience is, right? In their practice group, who has the most experience in areas that are similar to what they work on, right? All of those things. So those are just some of the goals that that we have for knowledge management at Bilson Sundberg.
Thanks. That was interesting. I mean, there were a number of things you mentioned there. One that I thought was particularly interesting, you actually mentioned more than once, is how Foundation and the experience there helps with various types of documents, both working documents as well as templates, and vice versa, I imagine. So it's interesting that there's that combination. Cindy, moving beyond just firm goals, thinking about how has Foundation helped your firm achieve your goals? I mean, you can address the goals if you'd like as well, but let's move on. Paul started to bleed into that as well.
I can't hear you.
Of course. So when we established our data and innovation team 3 years ago, the first thing we had to do was establish what we were here to do, right? So what are our goals?
Yeah.
And we really centered those around 5 things. The first one was to know your client. And Foundation has really helped us because before Foundation, there wasn't a central repository where you could go and understand who are the clients that we represent? What kind of work are we doing for them? You know, people would get various reports, and there was a culture of information sharing among certain groups, but what Foundation did was really enable the firm's growth as they had grown from, you know, sort of smaller, very tightly connected Midwestern offices to now all of a sudden we've got people all across the country, and you're not going to know what your colleagues in California and Denver and DC are doing, right? The other thing it did was reinforce our industry focus, because now we could very easily get to client lists of actual, you know, who are our manufacturers, and, you know, not just manufacturers, but who's involved in the aluminum and steel industry, right? So very specific, a lot more granular industry focus, which we have taken to the next level on the matter level, not just for clients, but we know now what matter work we're doing for specific industries. And then we are supporting much more efficient budgeting and pricing, because now we have the data behind, you know, finding those last 5 M&A transactions that we did for a closely held company, and being able to, you know, give a much better idea of how much that should cost and what kinds of things we might need to consider for that. You know, we're bringing more data directly to clients, and we're also supporting the firm's growth. So that is an area where we can really, we have laterals. I meet with every lateral that comes into the firm. And one of the first things I do is show them Foundation and say, this is the, you know, if you are meeting with somebody new, go here first to Foundation, look at their bio, understand how your practice might connect with theirs. Think about the topics that you might be able to talk to them about at dinner tonight. You know, that really helps that personal integration that makes a big difference as to whether or not that lateral is successful at our firm.
Oh, that's great. I talk to chiefs like you, and it makes me miss being a chief, because setting out clear goals like that and then seeing them become real is really rewarding. So it's fun to hear how you've set out those 5 goals with your team and then executed on it. But let's turn on the side that maybe isn't as happy. What kind of challenges, Paul, if you think back to the pre-Foundation days, you know, before you implemented Foundation, what were some of the challenges the firm faced that you were looking to address when you brought in Foundation? I'm sure you can remember. Yeah.
Some of these I remember very well, because I still have scars that, you know, I feel every once in a while. So starting with experience management, when I started at the firm 16 years ago, we had experience rep matters in Word documents and spreadsheets, much like a lot of firms, and probably even a lot of firms today. None of them were connected to matter numbers. So it was really hard to connect it back to the time and billing system, or back to who the actual lawyers were that worked on the matters. It was hard to understand who the clients were. The information was buried across various systems, and it was really difficult to get a handle on what types of work we did, and how often we did it. I remember one of our corporate attorneys asking me, can you let me know how many joint ventures we did in the last 2 years? And the answer was absolutely not. You know, I have no idea how many, and, you know, give me 6 months or 8 months and I can probably come up with a number for you. But, you know, that kind of information just didn't exist. So, so before Foundation, you know, information was buried in a lot of different places, and siloed in different departments too. I mean, sometimes marketing had all the information, sometimes KM had some information, other information was simply buried in the time and billing system that wasn't accessible to anybody else. right? There was no unified view of what we had done, and practices relied on what you mentioned earlier, again, Barry, talking to your colleagues and, hey, have you ever done, this type of matter with these kinds of circumstances? And so that was, those were giant challenges for us. Related to that, creating pitches and proposals was a really time-consuming process. And because there wasn't really a system or a formalized process, every attorney wanted a different matter write-up for their portion of the matter, right? If it was a real estate finance deal, everybody wanted it to only talk about the part of the matter that they did. So, so you wind up with one matter with 12 different descriptions that don't really, aren't cohesive and don't really give an overall picture of what we did in that matter, which isn't really helpful for clients. So it was extremely time consuming trying to maintain the bios and keep those up to date, keeping matter lists for attorneys, not to mention trying to put together information for RFPs and pitches. And the content was often outdated or missing entirely from what we had captured in there. Also, rolling that up, firm leadership had limited insight to what we could tell them about firm-wide experience. And I think my example of, how many joint ventures have we done in the last 2 years is a good example of that. Having the ability, using Foundation to be able to roll that information up for reporting and understanding in totality what our experience is in various either practices or industries was really tough, and Foundation has certainly helped us streamline that in that regard. And then I think the last thing that I'll mention is just how labor intensive it was to try to gather and maintain this information. And I remember being involved on the periphery of chambers processes, and years ago, the marketing folks would go and they would talk to the attorneys and say, what matter should we include? And then marketing would spend the next 6 weeks trying to figure out what the matter number was for those matters, right? And then that lived in that spreadsheet that didn't go anywhere else again. You know what I'm saying? So just the amount of repetitive, labor-intensive work that really had no value once it was created and unable to be reused were certainly challenging. So I think those are probably the highlights of my challenges pre-Foundation.
Wow. Your highlights are pretty comprehensive. Stacy and Cindy, similar experience? Do you have anything to add to Paul's description of the horrors?
Yeah, I mean, I think one specific example for us was industry. We had like an industry taxonomy list that had 30 values that, some of them were just terrible. They weren't real industries, and, it was really hard for us to, particularly in the financial sector, we work with a lot of, really big financial institutions, comprehensive financial institutions. We also work with regional and community banks, right? And being able to really just separate those and know, all right, this is the kind of work we're doing for this, group of clients and that we're doing over here. But also understanding the sectors that they're investing in. So, if we have a loan closing, was it for a multifamily, building versus is it for, a senior living facility or student housing? And so we could get a lot more granular with what our expertise was, working with that same bank across many, many different kinds of granular. So, yeah, that's certainly
similar to what Stacy had mentioned earlier about getting granular in whatever the practice areas that you're focused on. So, Stacy, let's move on to data-driven decision making. How has the adoption of a data-driven approach, powered by Foundation, changed the way your firm operates, particularly in terms of knowledge management and client engagement?
I think one of the biggest ones is it's provided us an opportunity to give clients real value in a way that they're sort of demanding nowadays. I think a lot of larger firms have, client extranets and stuff like that. And, one of the things that we provide is reporting on there, and we have dashboards for them. And now we can show trends. So for example, they can see, hey, we're getting a lot of EEOC charges in this particular region of the country, or in one location. Hey, maybe we need to go do some management training there. There's something going on. There might be something that we need to correct. And so we're able to give this to them so they can make decisions on it. So it's giving clients the ability to make data-driven decisions, because we can provide sort of cohesive data about everything that we're handling for them, and it gives us more work because they're more inclined to give us all of their labor and employment work, because we're giving them these insights about it. And so I think it's benefited both the clients and the firm in that way of, we can now provide all of this reporting on what's happening with their matters and where we might be seeing trends, where things are improving, whatever, and it can help them make decisions. And I think that's been the biggest change for us.
Wow, that's cool. Anything to add, Cindy or Paul?
No, I think, that's the holy grail of data for us as well, right? We don't want to be navel gazing. We want to be giving data to our clients that can be actionable to them, whether it's finding the right expert or understanding our experience with a mediator, or, whatever it is, being able to get to that knowledge quickly so we can give clients better answers faster. It's helping us do that.
When all three of you were introducing yourselves and describing how you use Foundation, you all described how you're bringing data into Foundation. I want to flip that around for a second. Cindy, let's start with you. First is, do you export Foundation data for uses outside of Foundation? And if so, can you describe how you're doing it and the value of doing that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, one of the ways that we're doing it is building sort of business intelligence dashboards, in particular, being able to look at our specific experience in the financial sector, in the real estate development sector, the types of transactions that we're doing, our experience with, again, sort of senior living or student housing, or, other type multifamily, low income tax credits, that sort of thing. And that not only helps our clients and be able to answer, RFPs and things like that very quickly, but it also can help recruit laterals to your platform, right? Because they can understand, oh, this is the breadth of the work that we do in our transactional side, and I'm joining, a big team that is doing things nationally. The other thing that we're doing that's a little unique is that we capture client activity information in Foundation. So we are capturing touch points with clients, whether we are meeting with them at a conference or taking them to some kind of entertainment event or going and visiting their plant. As for some of these manufacturers, it really helps us understand the work that they do. And we capture all of that, and we're putting it into our business plan information and dashboards that we can see. These are our targeted clients, and these are the activities we've had with them this quarter, and here's how the work is growing, right? The more we know our clients, the more we're talking with them, the more work that we're doing with them. So having those documents no longer be put into a drawer, but actually be a living dashboard that's fueled by data from Foundation has been a huge change for us.
Terrific. Paul or Stacey, anything to add? If not,
Yeah, I mean, I would say we do, we try to sprinkle Foundation data everywhere we can throughout the universe, starting with the intranet. For each user, next to their name on the profile when they log into the intranet, there's a number of clients and a number of matters, and they click on that and it takes them to Foundation, to the list of their clients and the list of their matters. And then, the hope is that once they're in there, they'll start, getting used to moving around in there and understanding how they can use it to get information on their own. Those lists also show, the last time that they billed to that matter, and who else billed time to that matter. We also add foundation links to every client and matter page on our hub, so that if they look up a client on the hub, they can then go to the foundation page on the hub. They can go to Big Square to get financial information from the hub. So we try to make it so that there's no dead ends when you're looking for information, just creating connections from one place to the other. And a lot of the times that's using foundation. Another thing related to the intranet is we created a facet for judge searches. So if you want to know, who's been in front of Judge Michael Moore, you can type in the judge's name in the internet search. It takes you to a list that is it's a lookup list from Foundation. If you click on the name, it takes you to the judge's profile, shows you all the matters we've had in front of that judge, shows all the timekeepers we've had in front of that judge. We also scrape information from the website for the judge for biography and contact information. So it's, like I said, we try to look for ways to sprinkle that information through and then make connections between the various source systems to try to keep people moving from one place to another without having to go back out to a different place and start over and work on that.
Mm-hmm.
All three of you have talked about use cases both within Foundation and that are externally, helping clients, providing information to clients. Stacy, I'm going to address this to you, which is, because you talked about using Foundation data to show trends and other things.
Mm-hmm.
I remember how sensitive lawyers were to make sure everything was accurate. How do you use Foundation to help clean up your data?
I would say that's our primary use of Foundation is data hygiene. That's what it is for. We feed Foundation into essentially every system. It goes to our CRM, it goes to our enterprise search, it goes to our intranet, it goes to our client extranets. And because Foundation provides a very user-friendly way to clean up the data. If I had to have people going into multiple different systems to correct something that's wrong, or they just wouldn't do it, and it wouldn't, and it wouldn't get done. But it also, we use it to find data that might be incorrect. So rather than just relying on other people to see, we have the similar thing with the links on our intranet, on the matter pages, client pages. And it even says, if you see something that looks wrong here, click this link to go correct it. But rather than just relying on people to identify those errors, we use Foundation reports to identify them. So we put together over 200 reports that go out at least weekly, sometimes daily, to different members, KM, marketing, whatever teams, based on particular criteria where it's like, this seems like it might be wrong. These things don't go together. Confirm this is accurate. And that has made huge improvements in the quality of our data. We just identify these scenarios where, hey, this might not be right. And then, a lot of times it will be, we'll reach out to the profiler and be like, hey, what's wrong with this? But it's making us aware of it so it doesn't just sit there incorrect forever. And so it's a big use.
That's an interesting perspective. I think you're the first person I've ever heard saying the primary use of Foundation. Yeah, that's fascinating. All three of you have talked about the benefits you found using Foundation to showcase experience at the firm in different ways. But I want to ask really directly, Cindy, I'll start with you. What are some effective strategies you've implemented using Foundation to showcase your firm's unique experience to potential clients?
Yeah, so one really recent example is that we're showcasing our trial experience to our product liability manufacturers. So Frost Brown Todd has an incredible amount of actual trial experience with those kinds of cases, whereas a lot of other firms may be sort of settling them out early, whatever. But we've taken many to trial, and so we're working right now. We've collected all that data. We have a terrific dashboard. We're going to be putting that out on our website soon, and really helping people understand, like, this is everywhere that we've appeared, here's our record, you know, we're just extremely experienced in that area. So it might be kind of a niche, you know, area, but it's really important to manufacturers to understand the depth of the trial experience that we have on our team at FBT.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting I've noticed about Foundation, every firm's competitive advantage is by definition different. And so firms have to mold it to present what is relevant to their clients, which is exactly what you did there. Stacy, I don't know if you already mentioned something that you're delivering to clients. Do you have anything to add in terms of showcasing experience?
You sort of hit a nerve there with me, Cindy, on this trial experience, because that's like the bane of my existence is those questions, particularly, I mean, everyone knows employment cases always settle. It's rare that we go to trial, right? But clients always want to know. They're like, how many times have you, I'm like, and it's not something you can get at intake. You know what I mean? It's something that only comes from later collection of what was the result of this matter. People are great about reporting victories, not as great about reporting their losses. And you would think, well, maybe you don't want to tell clients that, but some clients just want to know, have you ever gone to trial on, you know, these particular types of claims or in this particular court? And so we need to know the losses. Maybe it was really bad facts and it's not a poor representation on us. And that is somewhere where, you know, it's a constant struggle, but we're always improving and we are getting better and better about it. And people are seeing the value because they're seeing how often clients are asking and how often you don't want to have to be able to say, no, I can't tell you. Like, how many times are we going to, I don't know, give me a few months to find, you know, I mean, that's never a good response. And that's not our response now. Now we may have to send out a few, hey, the hours are really high on this matter. And I'm seeing some documents in here that looks like it went to trial. Can you weigh in? You know, you haven't been responding to the survey prompts.
That's great. It's a good tip to look at it in order to prompt them. Paul, anything else to add in terms of showcasing experience?
I mean, similar to Cindy's, we are involved in some of the largest opt-out antitrust cases in the country, and we have considerable experience in that. Including some of the largest settlement figures in the country. And so that's a big practice for us. And it's also something that we're constantly prospecting on, right? And so having the ability to show the depth of our experience with that with some major cases goes a long way toward bringing in clients, because you know, looking at our experience records in those matters, it's clear that we have, you know, a tremendous bench and breadth of experience in there. And, you know, just looking through that makes them immediately comfortable that we can take on those matters and probably win significant amounts of money for them. So that's been a huge game changer for us.
I love hearing all of these different use cases. So Stacy, I'm going to put you on the spot. Can you provide an example of how using Foundation has directly contributed to delivering increased value to a client? Was that for a challenge?
Yeah. So I don't want to reuse the same one, but it's so good. We have had several now where we started out getting only a small faction of the client's labor and employment work, where it was, you know, they only sent us their workplace safety, or they only sent us their traditional labor union work. And then because we provide them dashboards and trends and analysis and insights, they say, oh, I want to give you more. And so I have a few off the top of my head that now we're doing all of their labor and employment work because we were providing them more information. And, you know, one of the things that's a little unique about Fisher Phillips as opposed to other labor and employment firms is I think we represent a larger number of smaller clients rather than these huge ones. So some of the larger ones, they're using their e-billing system to provide some of that information. So we've all seen like the Time Metrics and the ones like that provide deep reporting, but other businesses don't have access to that. And so they don't have a place to look at all of their providers, you know, outside counsel together. And so with us providing that, it's really led to a lot more work and an increase in business because the clients just, they love it. They really do.
Mhm.
That's
Yeah,
great.
it's a
Yeah.
great point that Stacy makes that I'll just, follow up on, which is to say that many of our clients don't have a large legal operations team, right? There are a subset of the Fortune 500 that have those teams, but our clients need this data as much as we do internally, and the fact that we are able to provide it to them is definitely a value add for any law firm that can do that.
Yeah. Paul, I'm going to challenge you. Different angle, kind of the holy grail of technology is, can you share a success story where leveraging Foundation played a key role in winning new business at the firm? Obviously, you don't have to name the client, but do you have an example you might be able to share?
Yeah, I have an example, and I think this one is good in particular because it's not a specific client. We
Okay.
have a broad business development strategy where we proactively engage with law firms around the country, usually reaching out to alumni or attorneys that we have relationships with, and looking for opportunities to serve as local counsel on large real estate matters in Florida, because that traditionally has been our bread and butter. And so we have an enormous breadth of experience across those kinds of deals. And so we use Foundation to put together interactive PowerPoint presentations, as well as placemats to help facilitate the discussion. And it talks about the whole life cycle of the development aspect in Florida. And then we give examples of how we have facilitated with projects and hundreds of projects, and how we've done that. And because we're talking to firms that probably don't have a strong local Miami presence, and we're not a national firm who's going to go poach their client once we have this local matter work done for them. It's been very successful bringing in the local work. And I was looking over the last 5 years, and it's been in the millions of dollars doing that. And so, that's not looking at a specific client, but really using the relationships that the attorneys have built, as well as the power of the data that we can pull from Foundation, and put together in a way that helps them understand, and then also gives them comfort that they can come to us and work with us, and we're not going to walk away with their client. So I think that's been a really successful way to sort of add all those pieces together, and come up with a formula that has brought in a lot of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
It's really fun hearing how Foundation can help firms transform data to be impactful. And all three of your firms, like many firms, are starting to realize just how important data is. One of you has data in your title, Cindy, so I'm going to ask you this question because, in order to, this is almost like a paradigm shift, and it requires cultural change. So how did you facilitate the cultural shift towards data, relying more on data, relying more on technology? And maybe more to the point, what advice might you give to firms kind of starting on this journey?
One of the things that I really had to do coming into a firm, starting this whole new data department, was sort of say, yes, we're here, but we are not the department of data. We're going to facilitate you being a part of our data collection, right? We can't do it without you. You have an important role to play. And one of the things that we did was we created something called the Amazing Race, where we taught people about what kinds of things they could do in Foundation. We asked for a description of their, best matter experience. We had tons of, years of data that we knew about the matter, but we didn't know what actually happened, or just give us a good description of what happened here. And one thing that really did for us was to help each of them see why we need you, why you are a part of this, right? Don't think that the data team's going to come in here and solve all of our data problems. We are all responsible, whether it's the matter type you choose at intake, that drives the kinds of questions we ask you about this matter. And if it's wrong, that really throws us off, and we don't really understand the type of experience we have in antitrust versus data privacy versus data security. That's an important distinction. So I think, one of the things that we've been successful doing is just continually helping the firm understand that, we all have an important role to play, and that it matters. It matters to our clients, it matters to our practices, and, here's what it can look like. Here's what good can look like, and shining those examples of, you're not going to solve every data problem immediately. There's no way to do that. But if you choose, either go with the coalition of the willing, or find, that really important practice with a strong leader who can partner with you. I had, our chair of our real estate group came to me right away and said, I want to be the first. Please make my group, the first one to start using Foundation, and we did. And she was a great partner in that. But now we can show them the kind of data that we have to understand the real estate transactions and the breadth of the work that we do.
Yeah. Terrific. Well, all three of you have used Foundation underlyingly in kind of similar ways, but you all have different practices. Stacy, in particular, you described how your firm's different because you're really focused on labor and employment. So you don't have a real estate practice, for example, and so forth. So I'm wondering, how have you made adjustments to Foundation? How configurable is it to better fit your goals, which are probably unique and different from other firms?
I mean, I think that's maybe its biggest strength, besides I mentioned before being user friendly, is that it is configurable. I would not be surprised to learn that we had the most customized fields of any firm, because we have a lot. And it's about getting that granular detail, but also making it, user friendly. So a big thing for us is not just the matter type or the claims, but what we call dispute type. Is this a demand letter that you're responding to? Is it an agency charge? Is it litigation? Is it arbitration? And that's a distinction that matters when it comes to reporting on outcomes and stuff to our clients. So we have, that's a field. And then the resolution options, the outcome options are based on those selections, so that we don't let people choose a wrong answer. We don't let them choose, jury verdict on agency charge, so it is very configurable in that way, both in the fields that you can add and how you can make them reliant upon each other to ensure quality data.
Mm-hmm. That configurability to me also means that you can start small and grow. If we didn't have any history of collecting data about our matters, quite frankly, except for, in random spreadsheets here and there, I'm not going to go and ask people for 200 fields of information about every M&A, but I can start with 15 or 20 fields. And if we're successful in capturing those, then we can always get more granular, right? So the system can grow with you, which I think is a highlight of that configurability.
Yeah, and definitely one of the things we do on all of those when we introduce new fields, we always have an other option, and then we periodically review those others with the description saying, are there enough of these that are the same that now we need to add a new value? And it's like, people are capturing this is different enough. Okay, it's a new value for this. But yeah, absolutely, it allows you to start small, add more as you go, and also get a sense of what people are willing to do. It's always a balance between, okay, will they do 20, multiple choice check a box fields, or would they rather do one narrative field, or, it's a balance.
Paul, I'm going to ask you the next question, because we've talked about implicitly breaking down silos among data, but a lot of the success of Foundation comes when you break down silos with other departments, with, across a firm. How do you involve all of the various stakeholders in the firm to ensure Foundation is comprehensive, up to date, and being used firm-wide?
Well, I think in a number of ways. I think one of the most important ways is to help people understand what's in it for them. One of the biggest partnerships we have for KM, which is probably true for most of the groups here, is marketing and business development, and they have a huge vested interest in making sure that the matters get profiled so that they can be used on the website and in pitches and in chambers. So that one's kind of easy. One thing that I really hadn't considered was our coordination with finance and billing. And once we started talking to them about Foundation and explaining what our plans were and sort of laying out the layout and the plan for Foundation, and once they understood that we had already developed taxonomies for classifications of matters and industry categories for clients, they couldn't wait to partner with us to take that information and put it back into the finance system or layer it on top of the finance system, because they were like, what? We can run reports based on industries? Are you kidding me? Because no one had ever done that in their group or for them before, right? And so once they understand that, we'll then start to get emails and say, hey, do you think based on what's coming in, should we be re-looking at this industry, or should we add this industry? Or by the way, we were talking to the Chief Business Development Officer, and he explained to us that there are 3 new industry initiatives. Should we be looking at some way to track those coming in? And so, understanding that their cooperation brings a tremendous benefit to them really tends to get people on board. The other thing that we try to do is stay actively engaged with the practice group leaders, get them to review the matter categories periodically to make sure that they still align with the work that they're doing. Maybe 5 years ago when we created these lists, it matched exactly the type of work that they do, but maybe now they're working more with startup companies, and so there's a whole new set of criteria that we should be capturing with them. But they also understand, having worked with us for the last several years, that unless we can categorize those things or catch them either at matter opening or during the profile process, that we're not going to be able to give them the data, which they've really become used to. So, it's developing partnerships, maintaining relationships, and again, showing them the value that the partnership can provide both to them and to us. And again, rolling those up to the executive committee and the management team, right? Those are all things that everybody wants to be able to do. And so, taking the time to educate them and become partners with them, for us has been really successful. And I think that's been, a really good thing for us.
This time went really fast, so I'm going to ask this last question of all 3 of you. And Stacy, let's start with you. Talking to your peers, what advice would you give to another firm considering implementing the Terra Foundation?
I mean, I think both Cindy and Paul have already touched on areas of really good advice of, finding a group to start with that's going to have the support. I think a big thing for us was doing an initial review of the data, finding out what you have, meeting with all those different siloed departments to see what they can contribute, what they have already, seeing what needs to be aligned, remapped so that things make sense and can all be cohesive together. I mean, that was a huge undertaking, but that really led to our success by, incorporating the data that everyone already had in their silos and mapping it so it's all in one place, makes sense, and then sending it out to other ones that really contributed to our implementation and our success. And then, just modifying, growing over time, always keeping on track of reviewing your taxonomy. We're constantly adding, new matter types and sometimes even removing them, where people say, oh, we really need to track this separate area. And it's like, we've been watching this for a few years now, and now you don't need it. But the new industries, and that really leads to more business. So just constantly monitoring and meeting with those various departments and practice groups to make sure everything's fresh.
Yeah. Paul, any advice?
Yeah, my first piece of advice is always make sure everything is connected to a matter number. First and foremost, make sure everything is connected to a matter number. Second, I would say don't boil the ocean, right? Look for quick wins. Think big, start small, and show value early. And I think, Cindy's a perfect example of that with her foundation implementation. I think she followed that to a T, and I think that's, largely what helped them be successful in their rollout and really growing that into a firm-wide initiative. But, all the other that people said, including finding champions and all those things, but that's my short list.
That's great. Cindy, take us home with any final advice.
I'll take you home. Know what's important to your firm. Like what are the problems that leadership is trying to solve, so that you can set your goals correctly. But then, the famous Cindyism, you have to crawl, walk, run. You really, if you may have, there's so many things that foundation can do. You may have to pick one or two areas where you can really dig deep and have an impact and solve that problem. And that earns you the right to, start the next ones. But, there's so many amazing tools within foundation, but you really need to figure out, should we start with clients? Should we start with matters? Should we started with simply tracking our pitches and proposals and our pricing requests, right? That's an unusual place to start, but that was an immediate need that we had. And, doing that well leads you to the other data that's very connected within foundation. So lots of great people out there to learn from in this community as well.
Well, that's terrific advice, and the whole session was really fun and helpful. So Cindy, Paul, Stacy, thank you. And thank you everyone for listening. If you have any questions about foundation, feel free to reach out, and we will be sending out a link to this recording for those of you who are interested. And with that, have a great long weekend, everybody. Take care.
Thank you, Barry.